And we are recording. This is HJM Boxing, your host Harley. And on this video, I'm just going to break down the recent news that's just been announced by Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, that a pay-per-view's coming May the 1st, headlined by Derek Chisora, Joseph Parker. We've got Katie Taylor, the lightweight world champion, undisputed champion, versus Natasha Jonas from Liverpool. We've got Chris Eubank Jr. returning to the UK after some time out in America with Al Heyman and the PBC. He's come back, signed with Cowley Sal, and he's straight back on a Matchroom show in a fight against Marcus Morrison, Joe Gallagher trained fighter. And we've got a lot other fight that's been announced. A good fight, I think. Dimitri Bivol, light heavyweight champion, stepping a great WBA champion, good fighter, one of the best in the world in my eyes at light heavyweight, versus Craig Spider Richards, who's coming in the best form of his career, British champion. And he's a banger, mate. You see in his last fight, absolute banged out Shaq and Peters. And this is a good fight. 4 decent fights. I'm going to break down whether it's pay-per-view quality. I think, yep, I'm going to break that down and give my opinion. And in each fight, I'm going to break down my view on the fight and give a short prediction. My prediction might change, you never know. But right now, I'm going to give my prediction on who I think wins and what I think happens in the fights. First fight, obviously, I've just broke down on 4th on the card is the light heavyweight fight. It's Dimitri Bivol, light heavyweight champion, WBA champion, versus Craig Spider Richards, British champion, who I just said is coming off the best win of his career against Shaq and Peters. My thoughts on this fight is, so it's a decent I think Craig Richards is a decent underdog in this fight, but of course you've got to fancy Dimitri Bivol, light heavyweight champion for some time. He's beaten top quality names. I think level of fighters he's beaten. Obviously Craig Richards never mixed at that level. You look at your Jean Pascals, you look at your Joe Smith Juniors, you look at your Sullivan Barreras, all these names, you know, these are good names in the light heavyweight division. And I think Dimitri Bivol's beaten all these guys very comfortably, very well. A lot of top 10 fighters in the light heavyweight division, Bivol's done good numbers on. I think Dimitri Bivol's a talented fighter. I think he's one of the best in the world. I think obviously Arthur Beterbiev for me is #1 at the moment. I think Dimitri Bivol's got a very good resume, maybe arguably better than Arthur Beterbiev. And that's the fight. I think everyone wants to see 2 Russians, light heavyweight title fight. And I think it's a cracking fight between those two, where if it could be made potentially. But obviously we've got this fight, and this is a good fight in itself. Craig Richards, you can't overlook the lad. I think he's a cracking fighter. I think he's done very well at domestic level. He's cleaned up at domestic level. He had obviously Frank Buglioni fight. I think he just got credit from that. Even though he lost the fight, he took that fight on 7 or 8 days notice. And he went the distance, and I thought he won rounds against Buglioni and done very well, considering a guy who wasn't obviously in fight fitness, you'd say, and not in fight shape, or to prepare for 7 days in for a fight against a good fighter like Frank Buglioni. He done very well. He gave good account, and since that defeat, he's actually gone strength to strength in my eyes. He's fought Jake Paul, knocked Jake Paul out in a round, did very well in that fight, beat Andre Sterling well, and then he's obviously fought Shaq and Peters in a fight where I had him as an underdog, to be fair. I had Craig as an underdog. I rated Shaq and Peters going into that. I remember watching Shaq v Dex Spellman, some other guys. He'd done good numbers, good tall guy, very good with the jab, Shaq and Peters, but he got broke down by Craig Richards. I think Craig Richards really taught him a bit of a boxing lesson, really beat him up as well, and gave a brilliant performance. That was a brilliant fight, a brilliant performance from Craig Richards as an underdog in the fight. I think he was a 3-1 underdog. Knockout for Craig Richards, 7-1, and he really dismantled those odds and just showed what a talented fighter he is at British level. He's above that level, and that win against Shaq and Peters is underrated as well. I think you look at the guys like Anthony Yard, Boatsi, these guys haven't really got a win like a Shaq and Peters in my eyes, to be honest with you. They haven't got, I think their resumes haven't got the wins like that. Obviously, Lyndon Darth is another top light heavyweight. So I think Craig Richards is in that mix with these light heavyweight guys in Britain, and I think he's a tough fight for any of them guys. And of course, it's going to be a tough fight for Dimitri Bivol, because he's got that ability. He's got a boxing ability about him as well. He's got this belief in himself. He's a very humble, hard-working guy. He's with the Sims family, and the Sims are good trainers. You know, obviously they've trained good fighters. You know, your Cordinas, your Conor Benns, your Kevin Mitchell's, obviously latter Kevin Mitchell, great world champion. Got good fighters in their stable, and Craig Richards is in that mix. You know, he's a good fighter. I think he's got the ability. Can he beat a Dimitri Bivol though? That's the question. He's a big underdog. He's a very big underdog, and I can't see it, to be honest. I love Craig to prove me wrong. He seems a great guy, and I think he's a good fighter. And I think he deserves to be in a fight like this. He's not the worst fighter that can fight for a world title for Dimitri Bivol in the light heavyweight division. You look at some other opponents, some of these mandatories you see recently, you know, Anthony Yildirim's and people like that, you know, who aren't worthy of fighting for world titles. I think Craig Richards is worthy of fighting for a world title. I think he's got form in the light heavyweight division. He's a good fighter. He can bang, and he could knock out Dimitri Bivol. And I hope he proves me wrong, but I just can't see it. I think Dimitri Bivol too skillful, technically too good, and I think he'll win maybe a points decision. I think he'd win a decent. I think Craig's a tough guy, so I think he could go the distance in this fight. But I think I've got Dimitri Bivol unanimous decision. I think Bivol doesn't punch. I think that's the only thing with Bivol you can criticize. He doesn't knock guys out enough. I think he doesn't get people out of there when he maybe could. So yeah, for me, I think Dimitri Bivol unanimous decision, 12-round decision. Probably like a 117, 111. I think Craig might win rounds, actually. You know, I think Craig's good enough to maybe win a couple of rounds, but I think a wide points decision win for Dimitri Bivol. I think it's a good fight. I think it's one of the better fights. I think it's one of the best fights on this card, to be fair, because I think Craig Richards got some X factor out of him. I think he's an interesting guy to watch, and you don't want to sleep on Craig Richards. But for me, I think he's going to be an underdog in the fight, something like a 4-5 to 1 underdog for this fight, and I'll have Dimitri Bivol winning the fight. So unanimous decision, Dimitri Bivol at this stage, I'd say that. And you've got to back Dimitri Bivol because I think he's a quality operator. And I think, like I've said, he's one of the best at light heavyweight division. So I think this is a good fight, actually. It's not a bad fight. I think it's a good world title fight. And Dimitri Bivol, he's been out for a while, actually, 2019. So he's not been active. So that's another mark. I think ring rust is a big thing. I think in all fight games, ring rust is massive. So that's a little like red light danger zone there. So could be interesting. And don't write off Craig Richards. I think it's a good fight. It's a good undercard fight. Let's have that right. It's a good undercard fight on a pay-per-view. So I'll rate the fight. It's a good fight. The next fight, not so much. I don't think I'm going to rate this. It's Chris Eubank Jr. returning against Marcus Morrison. My thoughts on this is Chris Eubank, he hasn't fought since, I think it's Korobov, is it, in 2019, and that was a couple of rounds. Chris Eubank needs rounds. So for me, I would have liked to, he needs rounds. So, and he's fighting against a British guy, Marcus Morrison, who will come and give everything. Don't get me wrong, I think Marcus Morrison will give everything. He's a game guy. He's trained by Joe Gallagher, Joe Gallagher will always have his fighters up for fights and always in the best condition they can be in. But Marcus Morrison doesn't deserve to be in this fight, in my humble opinion. I think he's taken a few L's. Jason Wellborn, I think he may have come back. I think he got a win in Italy. He hasn't really fought anyone near Chris Eubank's level. He's not at Chris Eubank's level. And I think there should be a walkover for Chris Eubank in a couple of rounds, 3 or 4 rounds. I don't think this is a competitive fight at all. I don't see why Marcus Morrison's in this fight. And I don't think this is a good fight for Chris Eubank either, to be honest, to come back to. I'd much rather see Chris Eubank come back in with a durable guy coming to win. I'd even like to see him fight Matt Korobov again. I know, obviously, Matt Korobov's had injury problems and lost his last fight. I don't think Matt Korobov, he may even retire now because he's not actually in the condition. But I'd like to see Chris Eubank in that kind of ilk with a contender coming in, with experience, durable, and obviously got the game plan, who obviously believes they're going to cause Chris Eubank problems, because I want to see Chris Eubank tested, you know, because I think he's fought a lot of guys that have come to the end of their careers, you know. Obviously can't take away the win against James DeGale. I had DeGale winning. I thought DeGale would win the fight. I know, obviously he was washed DeGale, and that's a good win on paper for Chris Eubank. And he's obviously, Chris Eubank, he's beaten Arthur Abrahams, you know, names like this, good Chudinovs, good solid names in around the middleweight, super middleweight division. But these are guys that, in my opinion, were coming to the end of their careers, you know. He hasn't beaten any guys for me that are like in their primes, stuff like this. But he's a good fighter, Chris Eubank Jr. I like Chris Eubank as a person. Chris Eubank Jr. is a good guy. He's had good fights. He gives everything, doesn't he? He's a good guy to watch. You can't say you've never watched a Chris Eubank Jr. fight and been bored. You cannot say that about Chris Eubank. He's an exciting fighter. He's a very good fighter. He's got a lot of haters, but you want to watch him, don't you? He's a guy. These type of guys you want to watch because they're exciting in the ring. He's a showman, like his big old man. He's a showman, and he's a good fighter. But for me, he'll knock out Marcus Morrison in 3 rounds. Learns nothing from it. He's 28-2, isn't he? He's 28-29. He needs to get cracking, Chris Eubank Jr. for me. I know there was talk about the Charlo fight. Never happened, did it? I don't know whether that will happen now. I think I've heard Callie Salland, who I rate as a promoter. I think that's a good move, going with Callie. think he will deliver good fights for Chris Eubank Jr. I think he mentioned Murata. He mentioned, I think they've mentioned Andrade, Liam Williams. I remember maybe the winner of that they've mentioned for Chris. I think they mentioned Kell Brook. For me, I don't want to see Kell Brook fight at middleweight. I think Kell Brook is done. I don't want to see. I think that's a mismatch because the size difference. I think Kell Brook is a 154 fight. I don't think he's 160. I think at 160, you saw against Golovkin, he took a beating, and I think he'd take a similar kind of beating. And I think he's shot anyway. I think he should look at retiring for me. Kell Brook, after that Errol Spence, Terence Crawford fight last year, which I thought was a horrible to see, really, how much he's declined, really. His punch resistance looked gone in that fight. So I don't want to see Chris Eubank fight him. I would like to see Chris Eubank fight a Murata. I think that's a good fight. But these kind of fights are good. GGG potentially. I don't know. These kind of fights at middleweight are good. But no, I do not rate this fight. I know it's a tune-up fight. I understand he hasn't fought in a while, so I can understand the fight. And Chris Eubank's a big name. He adds to a pay-per-view fight. So I can see why you've added him to this card. But for me, it's not a good fight. Marcus Morrison is not at the level that's required. And I don't think Chris Eubank actually learns anything from fighting Marcus Morrison. So no, I don't rate this fight at all. I think Chris Eubank Jr. will beat Marcus Morrison in 4 or 5 rounds. That's my prediction on the fight. I don't think it goes many rounds. I'd be shocked if it does. But we will see, won't we? We will see. The next fight, the co-main event, the lightweight world titles, all the belts on the line. Katie Taylor from Ireland versus Natasha Jonas, Liverpool. My thoughts on this: it's a good fight. It's probably one of the best women's fights that can be made. Should it be the co-main event of a pay-per-view? Possibly, possibly. I think this is where boxing in the UK has come to now. They're trying to push the women's fights quite heavy. But listen, there are some talented women in Britain right now and in Ireland. Obviously, Katie Taylor, Chantel Cameron, Savannah Marshalls, Ellie Scottney. These kind of fighters are very good women, and they're good to watch. I like watching them, but I want to see them fight the best. Natasha Jonas as well is another top quality. Obviously, she's fighting. I like Natasha Jonas. I think she's brilliant. I think she deserves. Both of these ladies are very humble, very good, down to earth. They don't talk crap, They don't talk shit like you see a Clarissa Shields talking absolute bollocks. None of these women talk bollocks. They talk facts. They're humble. They respect the sport. They respect the code. They're good women. Well, Natasha Jonas, a mother, a single mother. You've got to respect these women. Warriors as well. I like Natasha Jonas a lot. I kind of want her to win this fight. I like Katie Taylor as well. What she's done for Ireland's brilliant. But I want Natasha Jonas to win this fight. I want to see her become a world champion. She's a humble lady. I like her. She's very down to earth. I thought she got robbed against Terry Harper. I didn't think that was the right decision. I know they gave it a draw, and one gave it to Harper, one gave it to Jonas, but I thought Jonas won the fight cleanly. I was quite annoyed. I had money on Natasha Jonas at I think it was 7-1. I thought the bookies wrote her off. For Eddie Hearn, the way they were talking, wrote her off in that fight. They were quite disrespectful. For Team Harper, for Steffi Bull, extremely disrespectful to the ability of Natasha Jonas, and I thought she lost the fight. I thought Natasha, that was her best performance of her career, really showed she's a top women's fighter, and I think she's game as well. I thought she was game as hell in that fight, gave everything, and I think this is a tough fight for Katie Taylor. I think Katie Taylor, I like her. I think she's on the decline a little bit, to be honest with you. I think for me, she lost to Delphine Persoon in the last fight again. I think she's lost, in my opinion, she's lost twice to Delphine Persoon. But listen, Katie Taylor's world class in women's boxing. What she's done in the Olympics, going back to the Olympics, and what she's done in the women's game as a whole is brilliant. She's a good pioneer of the sport. I think both of these fighters are great pioneers for women's boxing, great role models for women who are looking to come into boxing. Brilliant, both of them, and I really like both of them. So I like this fight, to be honest. I like both of them. I think it's a pay-per-view. It's a good co-main event of a pay-per-view. I think it's even better than the main event. I don't know why they don't push this as the main event, to be honest with you. I'd accept this fight more as the main event than the main event itself, which I'll get into in a minute. But I really rate this fight for women's boxing. I think it's probably the best women's fight we've actually seen in history, maybe, since women's boxing, since it's really got big in the last couple of years, or they've really tried to push it. I think this might be the best fight they've announced so far. And I'm a big fan of the fight because Katie Taylor, we like her. She's got great wins. Obviously Jessica McCaskill she beat quite well, and that looks a brilliant win when you look at what Jessica McCaskill's done recently against Salika Breakhouse. Beat her twice, undisputed in her weight class, Jessica McCaskill, and maybe that rematch will happen with Katie Taylor down the line. But don't write off Natasha Jonas. I think she's brilliant. I want her to win, Natasha Jonas, if I had to choose. I think Natasha obviously should have won against Terry Harper. 10-round fight, 2-minute round. So I think this will be an all-action fight. It's a tough one to predict, because I think Katie Taylor's declining, but I think Natasha Jonas is actually, she's shown us, I think she's in her 30s, isn't she now? 31, 32. Maybe I'm wrong. Don't quote me on that. But she's come back, and at her age, she's actually put on probably the best performance of her career against a young, I think Terry Harper's 23. And she gave the best performance of her career, against Terry Harper. So for me, I think I want Natasha Jonas to win. It's tough to bet against Katie Taylor. I think it's very difficult to actually win against Katie Taylor on points. Like I said with Delphine Bassoon, I think Delphine Bassoon won twice. I think for me, I want Natasha Jonas to win. But if I had to have the guns on my head, I would say Katie Taylor wins on points. But it's a good fight. And I think it is I think it could be a 50-50 on paper. It'd be interesting to see. The bookies haven't seen the odds on this one, but I think it's a 50-50 fight, maybe 60-40. They'd lean to Taylor. Good fight for women's boxing. It's probably the best fight I've seen in women's boxing yet. And no reason why this couldn't have been the headline, to be fair. Good fight. I rate it. It's a good fight. The last fight, now I've mentioned it a bit, but my thoughts on this fight. I think Derek Chisora is the headliner. I think he's the main guy, the first guy on the card. Derek Chisora versus Joseph Parker. My thoughts on this, not a pay-per-view headline fight. I'll tell you why. Derek Chisora, I love Derek Chisora, great guy, always value for money. Don't get me wrong, great guy. War Chisora, love the guy. Love the guy to pieces. One of my favorite boxers, Loved him back in 2012 when he fought David Haye. Loved him when he Vitaly Klitschko, when he fought Fury twice. Brilliant in entertainment. Always gives good value. Dylan White, double fights. Should have won the first fight against Dylan White. Always said that. Had his stinkers in the past. Kubrat Pulev, that was a poor fight. Ajit Kabiel, poor fight. But he's great value, Derek Chisora. Obviously, he had that brilliant knockout against Carlos Takam, arguably one of his best wins of his career. And he's always good value. Gave Usyk a good fight. A lot of people thought Usyk schooled it. I thought Usyk had a few difficult moments, struggled first couple of rounds, but I think Derek Chisora put everything in those first couple of rounds and ran out of gas. Usyk was a clear winner. 116, 112, I scored it. I thought Usyk won clear, to be fair, on points. But it never looked like knocking Chisora out. Still a tough man. Very difficult to get out of there. Derek Chisora only been knocked out twice, isn't it? Dylan White been knocked out one. Oh, trying to think. Yeah, twice. Obviously, Dylan White knocked him out cold, and he got obviously stopped by Tyson Fury, didn't he? And David Haye, 3 times. David Haye knocked him out. That was another good fight. I didn't mention David Haye. David Haye knocked him out. David Haye, Fury, obviously on a cut, I think, or he was out, wasn't he? Just out on his feet. 10th round, I think Don Charles called it off, and obviously Dylan White sparked him, which I thought it was a weird one, because it was when Chisora got points deducted from him, so he had to come forward. But Chisora's actually winning the fight in my eyes, and I thought the points deductions were harsh in that fight from memory. But no, he got knocked out against Dylan White in the second fight. And for me, when you've had 10 losses he's had now, I don't think you should be fighting as a headliner on pay-per-view anymore. He's not a pay-per-view fighter anymore, Derek Chisora. He's good value. Don't get me wrong. He's going to keep earning that money, and he deserves it, because he's fought fight after fight. Like I say, I love him. Maybe I think he should hang the gloves up. I think there's nothing for Derek Chisora to prove anymore. What's he looking for in the game? It's probably just more money, paychecks, isn't it? But can't blame Derek Chisora for wanting more paychecks. I like Derek Chisora as a guy, and as a fighter, I like him. He's exciting to watch, but he's not a pay-per-view fighter. Co-main event I can get, but as a pay-per-view headliner, you've got to be having world title. You've got to be bringing young fighters, like pay-per-view young stars, like young pay-per-view stars, in the UK. You've got to be trying to push these guys. I don't think Derek Chisora at 37, 38 should be headlining pay-per-views really anymore. And I think that maybe say the state of British boxing at the moment. We've got Derek Chisora still headlining pay-per-views. For me, he's not a pay-per-view fighter. He's a co-main event. He's on pay-per-view cards, don't be wrong, exciting to watch, but not a pay-per-view fighter. Joseph Parker, what can I say about him? He's done well. I think he's the biggest listen, I like Joseph Parker as a guy. Another one I like as a guy, I rated him on the up, against Carlos Takam when he beat Carlos Takam. I thought that was a very good win. I remember watching that. That was a brilliant win at the time. It was better than what Joshua, because I think him and Joshua were coming up at the same sort of level. So when they were both coming up, when Joshua fought Dylan White, Martin, these kind of names, I was following Joseph Parker on the other side of the world when he was beating the Takams, your Julius Longs, your fighters obviously domestically in New Zealand. He fought obviously Marcelo Nascimento, the guy Tyson Fury fought as coming up. He beat all these kind of journeyman type guys coming up. The Carlos Takams, Dimitrinkos. I was watching all these fights. I never thought, obviously Andy Ruiz, I never thought after the Carlos Takam fight he ever really looked the same for me. I thought he looked good against Carlos Takam, beating Carlos Takam to a good points decision, but never impressed me really after that. Obviously, he beat Andy Ruiz. I thought that was a good win, but that could have gone either way. He got a bit of hometown cooking in that. I think I scored it close. I think at the time I scored it just to Joseph Parker, 115, 113. Need to rewatch it. A lot of people had Andy Ruiz winning. I probably gave Parker the benefit of the doubt in that one, but it's a close fight. I remember it, and I think it maybe hometown cooking got in the decision in that fight. Became a world champion, WBO world champion, Joseph Parker. But since then, he never looked good for me. He's never impressed me. And I think he stayed way too loyal to Kevin Barry for too long. I thought, obviously, Dimitrenko, like I said, knocked him out. I think he laboured to a points decision, wasn't it, against the guy, I forget his name, Dubois knocked out, forget the guy's name, Razvan Kajanu. I've seen him live. Obviously, I saw Dubois knock out Razvan Kajanu. Got knocked out by Luis Ortiz as well. Yeah, Kajanu went the distance with him. And I thought, as a world-class fighter, if you're a world champion, you shouldn't be going the distance with Razvan Kajanu. These kind of fighters, you shouldn't be going the distance. And you look at young prospects like Dubois knocking Kajanu out in a round or two. This is what I mean. Joseph Parker hasn't impressed me. I think he's a beatable fighter in the heavyweight division. Just look at his resume. I thought Hughie Fury beat him as well. I thought that was it was an ugly fight. It wasn't an exciting fight. You could score it in many different ways, but I thought Hughie outlanded him, outworked him, and should have got the decision. Should have been champion there. So that was a poor decision. Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker, boring fight, very boring fight. Stinky fight. It was a horrible fight. Very boring fight. It was a stinky, horrible fight. Didn't enjoy that fight with Joseph Parker. And since then, I haven't enjoyed really any Joseph Parker fight. I think the Dylan White fight was a good fight. Give him credit on that fight. That's probably the only fight I've seen out of Joseph Parker's recent form where I've enjoyed watching him fight. Last round against Dylan, knocked him down, came close. Maybe he was a bit harsh. I remember the first knockdown. I think it was one of the knockdowns Dylan White scored. It was a bit harsh. It was more of a slip. It wasn't a knockdown. I remember. I can't remember. It was a slip or something or other. Dylan White they pushed him down or something, weren't it? I can't remember from the top of my memory. But he shouldn't have scored a knockdown in one of them fights, and it was a close fight from memory. Maybe was unlucky. Dylan White gassed in the last round, and that was a good probably one of Dylan White's better wins. But other than that, since then he hasn't really impressed me. Joseph Parker, Junior Farr fight didn't impress me at all. Boring fight. I thought it was a boring fight. I thought Junior Farr done enough. I thought Junior Farr was holding a lot, made it boring. Junior Farr, but I thought Junior Farr another one where he got outlanded and outworked. He hasn't been in great fights, Joseph Parker, for a while now. I think he's really rinsing it a little bit. He's now been on 3 Britain pay-per-views, He's kind of rinsing it now. Dylan White, Joshua, and now he's going to be on a pay-per-view with Derek Chisora. Not a pay-per-view fight. Not for a world title. There's no world title for it. For me, Derek Chisora and Joseph Parker, neither of them are top 10 heavyweights in my eyes anymore. I don't rate either of them. I think a lot of young guys coming through. I think Joe Joyce is better than both of them. I think Usyk's better. I think Pulev's better than both of these two, who obviously lost to a major. I think always in around that level. I think Tony Yoka coming up's better than these two guys. I think there's a lot of fighters. Andy Ruiz Jr. is better than these guys. Luis Ortiz, Povetkin, Dylan White, probably better than both. Yeah, Dylan White's probably better than, obviously at this stage, is better than both of these guys, and he's coming off a defeat. So for me, are these guys top 10 fighters anymore? Hrgovic, I think Filip Hrgovic is probably better than the two. Michael Hunter, another quality operator. So yeah, and Marius Breeder, so let's talk about him moving up to heavyweight. So for me, these guys aren't top 10 heavyweights. So why are they in pay-per-view fights? It's not an eliminator for anything. There's no world title on the line. I think it's just a bit, it's just overrated a bit. Like I love heavyweight boxing. Heavyweight boxing's probably my favorite division in boxing, because you get the knockouts, it's exciting, and this fight's probably going to be a great fight to watch. It probably will be pay-per-view worthy fight, you know. It'll probably be an exciting fight, and there'll probably be a big knockout, or there'll be some drama to it. But for me, it's not a pay-per-view. I think neither guys from their recent form warrants being on pay-per-view. Derek Chisora is coming off a loss against Alexander Usyk, you know, and he's now straight in a pay-per-view fight. Fair play to Derek Chisora. I can't blame the guy, because he's just earning that money, you know. He's getting them 2 million, 3 million paydays, and sorting his family out. That's what you got to do as a fighter. You've got to get paid. And if the TV see it as a pay-per-view fight, Eddie Hearn sees a pay-per-view, fair enough. But for me, it's not a pay-per-view headline fight. And like I said, I'll probably get more credit if they switch the Katie Taylor, Natasha Jonas fight around with the Derek Chisora Parker fight, and give women's boxing a massive stage, you know. Why don't you do that? Why don't you do that, other than put a Derek Chisora, who's probably washed now, in my opinion. No offense, Derek, I think you're probably washed now, against Joseph Parker, who's bored the life out of me for a number of years now, and I haven't seen improvement in him since Carlos Takam fight, and this was like 3, 4, 5 years ago. It was far too loyal, and I like Evan Barry as a guy. He seems a good trainer, seems a good guy, but you never improve him. And now he's obviously, they've parted ways, and I think he's joining Andy Lee, where I like Andy Lee. He's part of the Kronk Gym. He's part of Tyson Fury's camp, Sugar Hill's camp. That obviously he was assistant coach and helped guide Tyson Fury to the world title win against Wilder. But no, you might do good things with Parker, but it's too late now in Parker's career. You know, for me, Parker's another one of these guys. You know, like Andy Ruiz, lost the hunger. Money got to these people's heads, and it's only natural, isn't it? You know, like with Andy Ruiz, Parker, they made millions against Anthony Joshua. I think Joseph Parker made ridiculous money. I think he made £7 or £8 million. I don't know, maybe don't know. No, I think that's maybe a bit too high. Maybe £4 or £5 million at the Millennium Stadium fight, unification against Anthony Joshua. That's how much money. And when you're making this kind of money, it changes you as a human. It's only natural. And he never looked interested to me, Joseph Parker. Whenever I see him fight, he never looked interested. And I fancy Junior Farr to beat him. He didn't get the decision, Junior Farr. Politics around that, I think, to be honest with you, I think because they can still sell Parker as a good name and as a former world champion. He got the decision on that one, you know, boxing, we know how that goes. But no, I do not rate, this fight as a pay-per-view fight. And it's not a fight I'm interested in, you know. This pay-per-view it shows where British boxing's at, you know, that a lot of people are saying this is a great pay-per-view card. It's not. There's some good fights on it. I think there's a good women's fight on it. I like Bivol, Craig Richards on a pay-per-view card. It's stacking it up, you know, to make it a good pay-per-view card. But on paper, there's no quality. Well, like there's no with Parker Chisora. These are not pay-per-view fighters in my eyes. Together, it's not a pay-per-view fight. You know, it's just not. This is the standard of pay-per-view now. You know, Dylan White is kind of built that now, as you don't need world titles on the line to be pay-per-view now. But no disrespect, I like Chisora. Parker seems a good guy, you know, I like him as well. But for me, it's just not a pay-per-view fight. But listen, it'd probably be a good fight, you know. That's the thing. It depends what you class as pay-per-view. I class Tyson Fury pay-per-view. I class even Anthony Joshua's pay-per-view. I class Terence Crawford, these kind of Errol Spence Jr., these kind of fighters are pay-per-view fighters, you know. Golovkin, Canelo, pay-per-view fighters, you know. But no, it's just not Manny Pacquiao pay-per-view. This is what I mean. This is where the pay-per-view market is now. That anything that's half decent, I think, gets put on pay-per-view now. It is what it is, you know. All the fights are decent on paper, apart from the Eubank Morrison. I don't rate that fight, but Eubank's a name and he adds to a pay-per-view card, so that's why he's on there. I can see why he's on there. And for me, the card 6 or 7 out of 10. It's not great. I think, is it the worst pay-per-view? No, it's not the worst pay-per-view. That's saying something. There's been some worse ones in recent years. Obviously, Pellew Cleverly, fights like that. That was never a pay-per-view, obviously. And just thinking, obviously Mayweather McGregor, but it was what it was, weren't it? But you know, it is what it is with this. I'm rambling on a little bit now, but yeah, it's okay. I'll give my prediction on the Chisora Parker fight. I think Chisora knocks him out, you know. I've got Derek Chisora by knockout in that fight. Forgot to give my bloody prediction. I've got rambling on about crap. But for my opinion on that, Derek Chisora knockout. Knockout. Yeah, I think he could knock out Joseph Parker. I've seen vulnerability in Joseph Parker, you know. He's never been stopped, but Chisora can bang as well. It's I don't know. Oh, man, I'm doubting it, you know. It's a weird one. It's a tough one because I think this could go either way, you know. Oh, knockout, no. Well, no, I'm probably a bit overhyped on that. I think maybe Chisora points could nick a close points decision, a bit like Dylan White can nick a points decision, because I think Parker's there for the taking. And I think you probably make Chisora a favourite at the moment, actually. I think Chisora, you know, he lost to Usyk. He gave a good account of himself against a world-class fighter in Alexander Usyk. Joseph Parker, for me, he's looked poor for a number of fights now. And I think that he's could take another L here. So I think points, I'll say points Chisora, but I'd love to see a knockout. I think that was my heart saying knockout, but head points Chisora I'm going for in that fight. So my 4 picks on the fight are Dimitri Bivol, unanimous decision against Craig Richards. I think Chris Eubank will knock Marcus Morrison out 4 rounds. I say the fourth round he knocks Marcus Morrison out. I say Katie Taylor wins a point decision against Natasha Jonas, a close fight, another close fight, I think, but I wouldn't be surprised if Natasha Jonas wins. And I think Derek Chisora will win a unanimous decision against Joseph Parker. I don't think he'll knock him out. It could be a knockout either way. We'll see. It's an interesting one in the sense that I think both guys, you don't really know where they are at the moment, Parker and Chisora. So, yeah. But for me, rate the pay-per-view out of 10, 6 out of 10. Could be better. It's a lot of good fights, but there's no massive pay-per-view fight that makes me go, wow, about this card, you know. And it's like, obviously, you're getting Anthony Joshua, like, obviously, with all the pay-per-views that are potentially lined up, all the massive fights we're potentially going to see, you know, Billy Joe Saunders, Canelo, Billy Joe Saunders, Taylor Ramirez, Fury, AJ, potentially, if these fights, these are the fights I want to see. This fight isn't in that level, is it? It's not in that level, so 6 out of 10. I don't think it will do that well on pay-per-view. I think probably 100, 200,000 buys, maybe. I think everyone's more excited. There's other fights, isn't there? You're going to put your money for Fury AJ. You're going to put your money Taylor Ramirez. You're going to put your money Billy Joe Saunders, Canelo, Billy Joe Saunders. These are the best for the best. Parker, no offense to Chisora Parker, this is not the best for the best. Not even 2 top 10 fighters, in my opinion. So that's just my thoughts on it. It's my opinion. Some good fighters on this card. Some good fights, probably on paper, and it probably will turn out to actually be a good fight card. It probably turn out to be a great watch, and we probably see some great knockouts, and you'll see a great heavyweight fight. But for me, quality, I like watching quality on pay-per-view, and it's not quality at all. So there's other fights I want to see, and that's my opinion. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for listening. I know I rambled on a little bit, got a bit overthinking with it, but it is what it is. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, like HJM Boxing. And if you want to see some of my content on social media, we've got HJM Boxing on Instagram. Follow that. And yeah, see all my content. Enjoy the content. And let me know what you think as well, actually, on my comment. Tell me where I can improve, where you think I can do better with my videos. Just comment below and I'll read all the comments. And it's good stuff. Thanks a lot, guys. See you soon.